Okay. Good. Well, I just wanted to welcome everybody real quickly and thank the speakers for joining us today. We have professionals from 3 different organizations speaking about succession planning. So these topics include the importance of the exit planning process, fundamental value of the business and the factors that impact its potential exit value, creating a preliminary exit plan, creating a personal wealth plan that is correlated to your business exit plan, legal considerations relative to exit planning, options every business owner should consider when deciding how to approach transfer of his or her business, either during his or her lifetime or at death. So our speakers include today, Mary Ognebeen, partner at McConville, Considine, Kuhlman and Morin, PC. Julie Trivedi, managing director at NextPoint LLC. Dan Williford, also partner at McConville, Considine, Kuhlman and Morin. And Lee Woodring, senior vice president and wealth management advisor at Merrill Lynch Wealth Management. So I'll now turn it over to Julie, who's got everything set up to go.
Thank you, James. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julie Trivedi. I'm a merger and acquisition advisor at NextPoint LLC. We work with business owners to identify and design their ideal exit strategy. And when the owner is ready, when the company is ready, we also manage the entire sale process from preparing the company, finding a buyer, and getting the transaction closed. Obviously, we don't do everything by ourselves. I don't think there's any single advisor who can do all the different aspects of exit planning and execution. So we work with our clients, accountants, attorneys, business banker, and obviously the wealth advisor very, very closely. And speaking of wealth advisor, my co-presenter today is a wealth advisor. Lee, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Julie, thank you very much for that nice introduction. So my name is Lee Woodring, Merrill Lynch Wealth Management Advisor at Merrill Lynch. I've been at Merrill Lynch for 25 years. We've helped a lot of families and business owners through multi-generational planning, including exit planning. Julie and I were connected based on some education that we completed for our certified exit planning advisor. So our presentation will be linked together. We'll use a lot of that same language. So Julie, thank you. I look forward to the presentation.
Thank you, Lee. So let's jump right into this. Who needs to have an exit plan? Well, the short answer is anyone who owns a business should have an exit plan. When you look at some of the data, in US, there are 3.5 million businesses that are owned by baby boomers. Baby boomers are the people in the age range of 57 on the youngest side to 75 years of age. As you can see, about half of them have already reached the retirement age. And as a result, we are going to be seeing this exit wave, this exit boom in next 5 to 10 years. In fact, we already have been seeing since last 5 years, as many of the business boomers are planning for retirement and wanting to exit their business. So that raises a question for any business owners. What should they be thinking about if they are going to be exiting the business in next 5 to 10 years? Well, the first thing we want to pay attention to is the historical transition success rate. What you are seeing on the screen is out of 100 businesses, 80 businesses that go to market for sale do not sell. And no, that's not a mistake. I had someone ask me if I had made a mistake on this slide. This data has been confirmed by many different sources. We also have seen this repeatedly, that about 8 out of 10 businesses do not sell. 20% that do sell 16% of those will sell at a discount. So as you can see, the success rate of only 4% is pretty disappointing. And that raises a question that why this many businesses will not sell. What is wrong with those 80% of the businesses? Well, for majority of those 80% that do not sell, nothing is fundamentally wrong with the business itself. And we are going to be talking about some of the issues. Sometimes the issues are external, and as we all have seen, based on last year, that we don't have so much direct control over some of the external factors. If we talk about some of the specific things that we have seen again and again, in terms of the challenges, why these businesses do not end up selling, well, 50% of the businesses that are going to market for sale, it's due to one of the 5 Ds. What are those 5 Ds, you may ask? Death, disability, divorce, distress, and disagreement. So as you can see that no one plans for this type of events, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you have a very optimistic outlook. And we all hope that none of these things happen to us. But when they do happen, the business owner is not ready. In the event of death, the family members are not ready to plan for an exit or to execute an exit. And business itself is not ready. And when the business is not ready for sale, the valuation and its ability to sell will be impacted. And we'll talk about what are the things that makes business ready for sale. Another challenge that we have seen is the concept of value and income. We all love to talk about profit and income as a measure of success, but in reality, that's really a backward-looking measurement, right? So your buyers are buying the business not based on its historical profit, which is, by the way, very, very important. But your buyers are interested, and the reason why they are buying the business, it's for its future cash flow, right? So for example, if you are buying a pre-owned car and the seller is telling you, how great the car has been for him or her and all the great places that he has driven his family around, that's good to know, but you want to look at under the hood and assess the strength of that engine, right? Similarly, people who are buying your business, they want to assess the strength of your business and its ability to generate their future income. So when owners are narrowly focusing on the historical profit and just income in itself, they are ignoring the value drivers and value building within the business. So I know we talked about, you want to make sure your business is ready. When your business is not ready for transfer, if you find yourself in an unfortunate scenario of one of the 5 Ds, or if you haven't just planned and just hoping that your business will sell someday, what can you do today to build value within your business? Well, it depends on the type of business you have. It also depends the type of industry in which you operate. And more importantly, what are your goals and objectives as the owner of the business? So it's hard to come up with a one size fits all type of prescription for building value. We definitely want to pay attention to the specifics of the business and the goals and objectives of the owner. But there are some common elements that are common value drivers, which in my opinion can be applied, whether you are a small cafe or a restaurant, or you're a multi-million-dollar manufacturing or service firm type of business. So the first one is quality of the financial reporting. It sounds obvious and it's such a simple thing, but I cannot tell you that how many times we have seen good business, profitable business, but not being able to show to a third party what is their business model, how they generate the income, and what is their cost structure. So something simple as that, paying attention to the quality of your financial reporting, that can have a huge impact when the time comes to sell. Quality of revenue is another thing. So for example, if you are a pest control company, if you're an IT service company that's charging people on a subscription based, so you have a repeatable revenue and you also have a strong, reliable customer base, versus you are a company that's generating revenue through one-off projects, right? So you don't have a customer base that's giving you a repeatable revenue. Third one is owner dependency. And I want to be mindful when I talk about this because majority of the business owners, they are very passionate people. They have started, they'll build a business from scratch and they can multitask, you know. And I know that many entrepreneurs, that's how they started the business, by wearing many different hats. But when the time comes to sell the business, your buyers want to see that not only it's a good business, but can the business succeed, you as an owner being out of the picture. So I would say that, you know, it doesn't mean that you go out and start hiring people to replace yourself right away, if that's not what you want to do. But at minimum, documenting, you know, what is your role in the business, and then creating some systems and process, looking at your role and understanding, can somebody else step into your shoes and successfully do what you have been doing? That could be a good start. Management team, you know, very similar as owner dependency. One quick example, we received a call not too long ago from a manufacturing company, very, very good company. The numbers are fantastic, about $6 million in revenue, 700,000 in profit. They have been trying to sell the company for almost 2 years now. They did fantastic even during the pandemic. Their sales went even, increased during the pandemic. So that has not been the issue. So when we sat down with them, the owner of the company, he's the CEO, his wife is CFO, son oversees the operation, and daughter does sales and marketing. Both husband and wife want to retire, and the children, they don't have a lot of interest in continuing with the business. So they also want to leave the business upon sale. Well, that's their entire management team, right? So it's no wonder that they are having a difficult time selling the company in the absence of a strong management team. So, let's, pay attention to what are the things that your buyers will be looking for, and do you have those value drivers addressed within your company or not? Customer concentration, that's the risk, right? If you have 60%, 50% of your revenue coming from a single customer, or even if it's a concentration that relates to a specific industry, your buyers will perceive that as a risk. When buyers see something as a risk, they either want to put it back on the seller or they will discount the price. Last but not least, legal matters, legal issues. I know Mary will be talking about some of those issues, but buyers don't like surprises. And if there are any lingering issues, I know someone mentioned some environmental issues with the company. Any lingering issues that, even if it doesn't seem like a big deal in your day-to-day operation, you want to address those things well in advance of a transaction is going to take place. So that's basically what I wanted to share today. And Lee, if you're ready, I can pass it on to you.
I'm ready.
Okay, I will make you host. All right, you should be all set.
Okay, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yep.
Great. Okay, thank you, Julie. So exit, as Julie explained, just to start it off, exit planning can certainly be overwhelming, without a process or, certainly a framework. There are many factors that must be taken into consideration, right? I mean, you could be transferring to a family member, could be a business partner that you're selling to, your percentage, sale to a management team, sale to a strategic buyer or even a competitor, sale to a private equity firm. So there's a lot of options that are out there. Mary will talk a little about that later in the presentation. But the key is, to have a process, and the process that we've learned and followed through Exit Planning Institute is the value acceleration process, which is what you see in front of you on the screen. Another way of putting it is exit readiness, and we also refer to it as creating value. And we start obviously on the left-hand side of the screen under discovery, and we always encourage business owners to think about, it's like someone retiring from a company they work for, right? They start planning, generally they should start planning their retirement process well in advance. And sometimes business owners, depending on maybe maybe something comes up with one of those 5 Ds that Julie mentioned, or if they don't have that, it's perhaps like a situation last year with COVID, they decide, okay, I'm done, I want to get out of the business, there's too many complexities. But you usually want like a 2 to 5 year time frame to work through the process. It all depends on the complexities, certainly, of the business as well. But on the left-hand side, under discovery, we'll go through that business assessment. As Julie mentioned, she elaborated on business readiness with the current values, potential value, and then there's a value gap. Are you valued as a good company with a reasonable multiple in the world, or are you a best-in-class company? That drives a higher multiple. That would certainly, there's some value gap opportunities there if you start the process early on. And then certainly at the bottom left-hand corner, understanding what we refer to as personal readiness and financial readiness. And I'll elaborate on that. But as you move through the process from left to right, you can see that you get engaged, you minimize risk, potentially that customer concentration. You do put an actual growth plan in place. Maybe you have to expand your management team, hire some new individuals. You do your personal planning along with that. You engage advisors. Usually early on in the process, we encourage to have a value advisor, someone that can kind of quarterback the process. You're certainly your CPA, your attorney, wealth advisor is a core group in the beginning, but there's going to be, again, the complexity of the business, a lot of other professional advisors that need to be put in place. Not one advisor could do certainly the whole process on their own. Bottom right, you'll see the goal is to get the owner educated as we go through here. If you have a more educated owner, then they can decide on the right-hand side whether they want to not hang up the gloves, I call it, and sell the business, or they maybe need to grow it a little bit more, they get a higher valuation, or they decide to make an acquisition and keep the business. So it isn't all about total exiting, but it's what we refer to as creating value acceleration in your business. So just moving along to elaborate, what an exit plan is. As I mentioned, the solution is we call the 3-legged stool to maximize value at the time of exit and certainly minimize your tax situation. And the 3 legs of the stool are business readiness, financial readiness, and personal readiness. And all 3 of these legs need to be aligned in order to have a successful exit. You could be personally ready, but the business may not be ready. The employees may not be ready for a transition. And that's important to make sure that those 3 items are aligned. Business readiness, Julie elaborated on this, just the, strong financials, reduced customer concentration. If you own the business, but you're the top salesperson or the only salesperson, that could be a problem. So making sure the business is ready and in place for business readiness. Financial readiness is essentially you personally as a business owner. Have you done your personal planning? Have you articulated what your goals are, what you're going to need to support a retirement lifestyle in the future? Did you have a successful business that you were able to support your family members? When you exit the business, are you going to be able to have enough capital to continue supporting those family members? Or, that could be for some interesting family dynamics down the road. Is there a wealth gap? Is the business value too low if sold to support what your future, what we call your liabilities, which use your spending pattern into the future. So you could do all this stuff at the front of the process and through the process, and that will, it'll put you in a better position. Maybe when you're negotiating for a sale, you don't necessarily have to have the highest price. Maybe you find the best company for the best fit for your employees, because you know what your goals are and what you need from a dollar standpoint to support your particular lifestyle. And then lastly is just personal readiness. Are you ready to exit the business psychologically, right? If it's been your baby for so many years, maybe it's a family company, are you ready to leave and go off in the sunset and play golf or not be engaged? Do you negotiate some sort of a partial engagement? A friend of mine was telling me about a company that sold right at the end of last year on 12/31. They closed the business. Proceeds went into the bank account. And then the client told me that in July of this year, the owner bought the company back. And I kind of just asked some questions. I said, was the client ready financially? He said, yeah, I mean, they had enough capital, to plan for their particular goals. The business, based on some of the questions, there's some longtime employees that had some concerns. So I would say the business was partially business readiness. I asked, personal readiness for the business owner, and said, yeah, the owner was personally ready. And I said, well, why did he end up buying it back? And he said that because the new company, which happened to be a competitor that bought them, put profits ahead of people. And they've always operated the company as people ahead of profits. So you don't find that all the time, but certainly it's not common to buy a business back, but the owners are able to negotiate a deal. So the three legs of the stool are certainly critical. And so what's at stake in this whole process? It's different with business owners, right? 65 to 85% of their net worth is tied up in the business. So, certainly planning is an important concept here, especially if you have that much money on the line. Are you financially ready? What are your financial assets? What are your financial goals? Is there a wealth gap? The question, you need to ask yourself, if you're living off of a lifestyle business, are you gonna be able to sell that for an amount of money that when you monetize that to support your future lifestyle? So those are good things to find out in the very, very beginning. And you can do that through your business readiness, certainly personal readiness and financial readiness assessments. Couple other item slots to move forward. Do you have a plan, after retirement or after the business sale? And, a study that was done through EPI said that 12 months after selling a business, 3 of 4 owners surveyed profoundly regretted their decision, to sell the business. And why was that? Because they had no process. They had no team in place, cohesive team to help them, to certainly help them through that process. And they certainly didn't address the 3 legs of the stool. Owners can potentially leave a lot of money on the table, millions of dollars. Again, we talked about earlier whether it's a good company in terms of a ability to sell a company at a good valuation, or is it a best-in-class company to earn them a top multiple? And then certainly a low multiple could put you in a situation where you're losing, retirement income, right? Loss of value or additional loss of value because you're not prepared, or you're in a situation where you're negotiating with a fairly savvy buyer, and if not having proper representation or not being in a position where you know where you are could put you at a disadvantage of not having that appropriate team in place. Lastly, last 2 slides here just to cover a couple things, just as an example of a personal readiness that, we would do, someone like Julie would do on the front end as a value advisor, just, really baselining where you are in terms of dependency of income on the business. This is just personal readiness and some financial readiness, knowledge of what your deal structure are. Are you educated about where the deals are? Are you educated as you go through the transaction with respect to the estate or the tax ramifications of that? So you can see all the pieces coming together it's important to have the right team in place, because there's a lot of decision making, and potentially if a team has the ability to talk through a decision well in advance, then they have, I call it the domino effect. They can certainly look out to see, what decisions today are going to affect certainly decisions tomorrow. The team looks something like this. So a good exit strategy, has the right professional team in place. It does improve the possibilities, of success. It shortens the time to exit. Even though I said this 2 to 5 year time frame, again, depending on the complexities, you're following the process. And then ultimately, which is the goal, is if you can, I don't think anyone would argue, right? If you could, significantly increase the valuation of your business and sell it at a higher price to a buyer, that would be a good win for the business owner. And just to wrap up, as I mentioned, the wealth advice, all these players are really, really, really important professionals. Just that they come in at different times, right? And as I mentioned, your CPA, your attorney, your value advisor is probably one of the key areas to keep it all moving in the right direction. Your wealth advisor, those are the key players in the beginning that will help you get on the road to a successful exit. So with that, I'm going to share this with Mary and let her take over the presentation for her piece.
Thanks, Lee. I appreciate that. I hope I have unmuted myself, probably the most important part of my presentation.
You're good, and your host.
Okay, great. I don't have any slides. I prefer to just kind of talk to the gathering here about what I have to say, which really kind of is a continuation of Julie and Lee's presentation about getting ready. So there are some important things I want to share, and I kind of separated them into 4 parts. So we'll just kind of walk through this. And the first thing that actually, Lee, you kind of reminded me at the end of your presentation, is that I feel sometimes that there is this, I have seen it in my career, that there's almost a cultural silence about transitioning, that we are taught in our business lives to push hard, to, grow that business, to make that personal reality, that personal fortune. Especially I've seen it with business owners, but nobody really talks about what's next. And it comes on you oftentimes without you being prepared. And it's so true. Julie, you had mentioned those 5 Ds. In my career, I've seen how many business owners come to us, the attorneys, to help transition when the business is already in a bit of a crisis. And that's not how you want to handle the situation. Everything is this super rush. Nobody can do their jobs the way that, the best way that they can for the particular party. There's just better ways to do this. So I think part of what we're trying to do, the 4 of us, is get out there to the community, because there is a need to say, hey, it's okay to even start thinking about this stuff. Here are the people that you should be talking to. Start thinking about it. So let's kind of do that. An overview. I think I keep going back to COVID itself has taught us that we need to expect the unexpected and be very, very flexible with how we conduct our lives these days. This is no exception. If you own a business, recognize that you need to be flexible, and you need to kind of start the process of recognizing the writing on the wall sometimes. So with that, start now. The sooner owners can discuss the future of the business, the better off everybody will be. I have read articles that there's 30 trillion in wealth that's expected to transition over the next generation. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of business. It's a lot of business waiting in the wings, but unfortunately, it's a lot of business that's going to fail. If I can't stress that enough, if the planning is not done correctly. I'm brought in, typically further down the line when the deal itself has been structured from a business perspective, and you have the financial advisor, the valuation advisor, the CPA has already looked at the plan, and they kind of hand this menu to the attorney. But then in different personal situations with the business owners, oftentimes if it gets to me, I'm writing a deal that is infused with panic. And it's just not the best way that it can be done. So again, start now, recognize also the generational differences. I'm just going to use a family business as an example. If you have a business owner, that business has a particular reputation, a long haul reputation of the business, and the business owner wants to hold on to that. It's very hard to give it to another person. I understand. I hate to delegate. I get it. But there comes a point where those decisions, those considerations need to be faced. So you have to pick, who will it be? Who is going to be that team or that person who's really going to take the reins from you? I've seen successful examples where, you have that, for example, with a family business, you have an in-law who is really good at running the business, who's deeply involved, who you're really excited to hand this to. But the way your business has been set up before that point, you have your own children who already hold rights that they don't want to give up at this point, but they might not be the best people to transition your business to. One example, obviously can never give names, but there was a business in the Buffalo area, $30 million business. In a few years, the owner had died, the son had taken it over and whittled that down to 3 million. Just a few years later, and now you can drive past the business and there's literal tumbleweeds going past. I mean, they had to close down. It was an amazing small business, and it breaks my heart because I got into this to really understand all the different ways that people make a living. And it's not just about paper to me, even though we have all these charts that we're showing you. These are stories. These are families. So you have to kind of look at it with that heart perspective, using your brain and, choosing the right people. So what about non-family personnel? Kind of moving into that second point, who is the right person? If it's not someone in your blood family, if there's someone else, a non-family personnel that you'd like to bring in, I've seen successes when people start early. They open up about these conversations. They get employee buy-in, is what we call it. Studies have shown that contrary to conventional wisdom, the solution is not to discard family succession altogether, but non-family employees often prefer family succession to keep kind of the whole theme of the business strong. But you have to reinsure those employees that the next generation will be equally strong and will have as much skin in the game and will work as hard and be committed to that purpose. The best way to do that is to foster that familiarity with your key people, not with everybody. You don't have to, disclose your plan to your whole company. That's not smart, but develop that management team. Start opening up about your strengths and your weaknesses, where you need to fill in those gaps for the next generation. Okay, foster that familiarity. If you have someone in mind, whether they're an employee that's not a family member or whether they're a family member, start holding them. I call it raising the bar. Hold them to a higher standard, because you have employees who are now going to have to report to that person, and they're going to have to respect that person like they respected the initial owners. So be open with those considerations, give employees time, have those upfront conversations, bring the non-family members in to help prepare that next generation. So those are just some tips, some ways that, in addition to valuing the business, take stock of who's going to be running your business, how you want that to look in the future, and open up. Just start this process. So then kind of the third piece of what I thought really important to communicate is getting your house in order. And this kind of crosses over with financial and legal concerns. Julie and Lee started talking about setting financial goals. The owners should determine their long-term income needs, their retirement goals, and determine how much money a potential sale of business might generate to allow them to reach those goals, or otherwise to, follow other plans of transition. So set those financial goals, get your business valued, quantify the value of the business. There's one thing I'll say here that's important too. We have mentioned bringing in the right professional advisors. a CPA is super important. Any kind of transition, you want to make sure that the tax implications are well planned out. A financial advisor, also a value advisor, like Julie in our group here. You could, if you don't know where to start, I would start with her, because a value advisor can help you get from A to B with respect to what you think the value of your business is versus what it really might be, and how to fill that gap before you're actually ready to pull the trigger on a transition. So you can work with a value advisor and also bring your attorney in at the right stage in the game. Talk to those particular people, clean up your financials, identify risks if you have environmental risks with respect to your business. I know Diane was mentioning a dry cleaner earlier in our, just before we started our conversation. There's some environmental concerns there they might want to be looking at if they want to transition their business. Look at your real estate. Look at your corporate books. Oftentimes they are messes, and we have to do a lot of corporate housekeeping to connect the dots before we can sell that business. Review your insurance. Then once you're done with that valuation result, if you like it and you want to transition and sell, great. But if it's not to the level that you want or need, then there might be some things that you need to do to stay active to increase the value of your business before you're ready to transition, or, to improve your financial condition. You might need to enhance or diversify your sales. You might need to, take care of some debt or plan for it, in accordance with whatever sale that you're envisioning. Prepare your management team, like we've just been talking about. If you haven't already, talk to those key employees. Clean up your financial statements, study your securities, be certain of your ownership and the structure. Check any regulatory compliance or permitting issues that may arise with respect to a transition. Check employment agreements, what may happen with your employees and all that. Check your main customer and vendor contracts to determine the terms that may affect what you want to do next. So also, you might want to plan for unexpected situations if you have a key employee who gets sick or dies in the middle of this. Buy-sell agreements, shareholder agreements, things of those nature. Just turn those stones over, face it. Start looking at that business and plan. It could take well over a year to get yourself ready in a deal situation. The last thing I want to talk about are the models, the typical models that businesses use with respect to transition. People can ease into or test the waters of a transition. If you have, for example, an operating agreement, there are going to be terms in that operating agreement, if you have an LLC, that determine restrictions on transfer. If you want to transfer stock to someone or another entity, you may be limited in your ability to do that by the terms of an operating agreement. You're going to want a lawyer to look at that. You're going to want a lawyer to look at shareholders agreements, which kind of have those same buy-sell terms in them. You can alter those terms as well. For example, if you have an owner who has children who wants to give the children a taste of ownership without full management authority, you can create two classes of ownership, one that's not voting and one that is. And the one that's not voting, you can bestow this ownership on that, son or daughter or relative. Start to bring them in, but still retain control until you're really ready to transfer it over to them. You can do all sorts of things with the governing documents of a company before you actually sell, if that's what you want to do. You can test the waters to see if the next generation is willing to and able to take these reins. But if you get to the point that you want to sell, and this is what the last thing I'll say, the typical models are asset purchases and stock purchases. An asset purchase happens when a business sells its assets to a buyer and liabilities to a buyer. And the buyer, they prefer asset purchases because they can pick the assets and they can choose the liabilities. There are disadvantages. I'm not going to say disadvantages. There's just certain hoops you have to jump through to do an asset sale that are different from a stock sale. A stock sale, the difference is that the new owner essentially steps into the shoes of the seller and owns the stock as though, there's not as much picking and choosing with a stock sale. There are different risks involved. But those are the two main models if you get to the point of sale. There's also mergers. And there's also the choice of gifting a business. I don't do much of that, but it is out there. And you can also just run out the business and dissolve it if you just don't want to, pass it on for whatever reason. But most people, when they get to that point, do an asset or stock sale. So I'm going to leave you with start early, face the music in terms of, where you want this business to go, who you want to take the reins from you. Do that diligence, bring in the right people, start with that valuation advisor like a Julie, and look at all your documents and then plan. There are many options out there, but the sooner the better. So thanks. Oh, I need to make you the host, don't I, Dan? Okay, hold on.
Thank you, Mary.
Yep. Okay, I think you're the host now.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Looks good.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mary. My name is Dan Williford. I am one of Mary's partners at McConville Considine. Yesterday was my 9-year anniversary here at our firm. As Lee had showed you about that wheel of advisors that are all good to have in the event that you want to make a transition of your business, I'm one spoke on that wheel, the trust and estates wheel. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you about, is just, how my role fits in with what you want to accomplish with your, business succession plan. Succession planning has become a pretty hot topic with TV and movies these days. It's never been more obvious than the TV show Succession. So this is a picture of Logan Roy, who is the head of Waystar Royco on the show Succession, which is a huge billion-dollar multimedia empire that he's built. He is 80 years old in the show, has virtually no succession plan. So what happens? He suffers a stroke. There's a mad scramble that occurs between his children over who's going to run the business and in what capacity, which plays out to dramatic effect. And then, lo and behold, not to ruin too much of the show for you, he ends up recovering, and then it leads to more confusion over, who's going to run what, when. And again, the call to action here is that, you don't want your professional love, the business that you've put your sweat and tears into, to be a TV movie drama. You really want to plan ahead and make sure that you have the right systems in place, as Julie mentioned earlier. Just to kind of put some statistics out there, these statistics, and as other statistics have been mentioned earlier, are fairly dramatic in the sense that a very large percentage of businesses, as you can see, fail to transition. And that could be, failure within the first year, or 50% fail within a 5-year time frame. Overall, 75 to 80% fail to transition ownership in general. So those numbers are striking. And that's really because of really the last bullet point here. 20% of businesses surveyed have a documented plan in place. And ultimately, that's just not enough. And when you talk about the amount of wealth that's going to be transferring from small and medium sized business owners soon, really, if they don't have a documented plan in place, you could end up being a company like Mary mentioned, which, ultimately loses a significant amount of its value and doesn't transition to the next generation or to the future owners. And as Lee had mentioned, there's even very few businesses that even end up selling simply because they're not prepared to sell. So that's a significant issue. In terms of succession options, typically in my experience, you see one of these 6 options play out. The last 2, certainly not as frequently, because those would require, very large businesses. But typically you see, a sale, an owner run out the business, some form of management buyout, or the owner decides to gift it to different people, beneficiaries. So my role is really to advise clients about what are the estate planning implications? If you sell your business, if you do gift it, or even run out the business. So what are the implications of that from a estate tax perspective, other tax liability perspective, and also, what to anticipate, even from an estate administration perspective. Another example, so the show Empire, that is, Lucius, who is the patriarch and owner of a record company, who experiences a diagnosis of ALS. No succession plan. So dramatic effect again. Who of his 3 kids or his wife is going to manage and take care of this business? Again, playing out to dramatic effect for TV. Doing nothing and running out the business is unfortunately all too common. And as Lee had mentioned, this is not like selling a house. I found that it can be anywhere from 2 to 3 years to, get a business's financial house in order, just between due diligence and appraisals. And as was mentioned earlier, the unpredictability of, death or disability of either the owner or a valued member of the company can just lead to a significant risk in the value of that business if it's not prepared. You tend to see this more often when the owners have that viewpoint that their skills are too specialized, either from, a business savvy standpoint or a sales standpoint, or, whatever the case might be. They feel like they're too specialized and they feel like nobody can run it like I can. So they avoid the succession conversation. But if they do that, I think every business owner certainly understands, or they should understand, that you're putting employees at risk. You're putting the legacy that you've worked for at risk. Also, if it has a significant impact on the community, you're putting the community at risk as well. So again, you sort of have that that feeling, and I guess business owners feel differently, but about, again, preparing for these unpredictable things that could occur at any time, and be prepared to transition. One of those 5 Ds is disability. So, and this could easily end up being or having long-term care consequences, which could just be disastrous. So Lee had mentioned that for a lot of business owners, there's a high percentage of their the value of their estate that's tied up in their business. So that means that there potentially is not much liquidity there. So you run into this risk of, well, if I need long-term care, that could be an upwards of $200,000 a year for long-term care expense. So all of a sudden you turn around and it's, oh my gosh, I need to generate this liquidity to pay for my long-term care. How do I do that? Another example here, a picture of Don Corleone. So obviously could run his organization very well. You could easily make the argument his succession plan was not a good one. Very much rooted in, well, my oldest son is just going to take over, but we all know Sonny was not capable of running that organization. So it ultimately worked out that his son that was more capable ended up taking over. But still, really virtually no succession plan, or you could say a very bad one. With any estate planning conversation, you always run into the choice of fiduciary. So, whether it's naming an executor in your will, or if you have, a certain amount of trust set up, to handle your estate administration, you want to choose the appropriate fiduciary. So if you're a business owner, it's very important that you consider who you're going to name as the fiduciaries and make sure they have the correct authority so they can do it effectively. That could be either selling, merging, reorganizing, recapitalizing, dissolving the business, being able to hire employees. All of these things need to be incorporated in these estate planning documents to make sure that if there is an unpredicted, disaster by way of death or disability, you have the people there to take care of these things. In particular, with the choice of trustee, certain banks and institutional trustees just kind of gives you a snapshot of how they assess risk. So if they see that there's going to be family disputes or lawsuits or environmental issues, they're all red flags for a bank that may force them or have them decide that we're just going to renounce this. We're not going to be the trustee of this disaster. But if they see that there are limited partnerships in place, or if the person is a minority owner of the corporation, typically there's lower risk there. So again, they're more likely to take that on. Also, if it's specialized, if it's a farm, if it's a company involving, oil and gas, mineral leases, things like that. Again, some banks and some institutional trustees specialize in those areas. So things to consider when you're choosing, fiduciaries. Another very important authority, to put into place is making sure that, if possible, the fiduciary can place the business interests into an LLC or some form of corporate entity to reduce the liability, to make sure that it's not open to exposure from, lawsuits and other risks. Now, what if you, similar to not planning to transition your business, what can happen if a person just doesn't have any testamentary documents, between a will or a trust? Well, naturally, that can just be disastrous. There could be no appointment of an executor or a trustee. This would leave potentially certain beneficiaries or certain family members to, fight over who's going to be the fiduciary. This could lead to litigation in surrogates court to determine who the fiduciaries are. Like anything with the word litigation, it's going to be timely, it's going to be expensive, all of the above. So certainly that's to be avoided if possible with correct planning. Sometimes co-fiduciaries can be a big problem. I can't tell you how many estates that I've worked on where kind of the default is, well, I don't want to choose between one or the other, so I'm just going to make all three people the co-fiduciaries. Well, that can be okay sometimes, but if those co-fiduciaries don't get along, you better be prepared for drama, and you better be prepared for litigation. My best advice there is that if you do decide on co-fiduciaries, you want to have some kind of tie-breaking mechanism to put into place. Otherwise, again, you're just walking down the path of more litigation. Example number 3, 6 feet under. See a picture here. So this is actually the reading of the father's will by the attorney to his children and to his wife. It's a funeral director, so small, medium-sized business. He decides to leave the business to his 2 sons, but as you can see, the one son on the right, tie wearing, into the business, as experienced running the funeral home, well versed in it, straight laced. You got the son on the left, moved out to California, wanted nothing to do with the family business whatsoever, and all of a sudden he is now the co-owner of it. So again, probably not the greatest decision making there, and again, plays out to dramatic effect on the show. What you want to be very careful of is your documents being out of sync. So you most likely, have some form of entity governing document for your business, whether it be a, corporate entity or, LLC, S Corp, whatever it might be. But you want to make sure that those documents and those operating agreements, they mesh with what you have going on with your estate planning documents, between your will and your trust or whatnot. Because if there is no connection between the two, again, it can just very well lead to problems about, does the fiduciary of your will or trust have the right to be a part of controlling decisions with the entity? Which members of the business have the ability to purchase the shares through the operating agreement, and how is that potentially going to play a role in the estate administration? So again, you want to make sure everything flows correctly. And are there mandates, in these documents to sell or to retain the company? And you want to make sure there's certainly a connection here between liquidity and estate taxes. So again, going back to that concept of, if most of the value of your estate is in your business, How are you going to pay for, how are you going to pay for estate taxes if you have a taxable estate? We all might not be as lucky as, George Steinbrenner, the former owner of the Yankees, who, died in 2010 when there was no federal estate tax that year. So what did his estate owe for taxes? Zero. But however, you draw it in comparison to Michael Jackson, who died in December of 2009, and his family and his estate owes hundreds of millions of dollars to the IRS. So, again, you need to have a connection there between an understanding of the liquidity you're going to need and potentially what your tax liabilities are, so you can prepare for that. Lastly, I just want to cover with you probably the three most common topics of conversation in an estate planning sense that I have with business owners. So certainly if it is an S Corp, typically again for small, medium-sized business, what you encounter a lot is if the owner wants to leave, those shares of the business in trust, you have to make sure it's a qualified S Corp trust. So it's got to have the appropriate language, for tax purposes and other factors to make sure that that trust is going to be set up effectively and run effectively by the trustee for the benefit of the beneficiaries until they're ready to take over. Okay. You also see and talk about irrevocable life insurance trusts a lot, or ILITs. The purpose behind an ILIT is really to potentially put into place a life insurance policy that is owned by this type of trust. And if a person passes away, the death benefit will not be part of the person's taxable estate, and the death benefit can be used to pay the estate tax liability. Okay, so this is kind of some ways a liquidity generator to pay estate taxes, but again, it will pass outside of the taxable estate itself. Sometimes you talk about family limited partnerships, okay, which is kind of the estate planning technique where you or the owner potentially would gift certain shares of the business during their lifetime, which are typically the non-voting, the non-voting shares of a business, which we commonly would refer to as the B shares, but the owner would retain what we call the A shares, which are the voting interests. But when a person passes away, the A shares that they retain can be, given a value that is significantly less than what they normally would be outside of a family limited partnership, which again reduces the value of a person's taxable estate and can save significant amounts in estate tax. My own personal favorite here, Robert Baratheon, once king of the Seven Kingdoms in Game of Thrones, but zero succession plan. This is a picture of him on his deathbed, telling his best friend that he wants him to effectively be the trustee of the kingdom and take care of his son, who's going to take over eventually. But anybody that's seen the show knows that this plays out to disastrous effects, to years of war and terribleness. So once again, don't create your plan in this situation right here. And that's all I had, for my segment. But here's a slide with all of our contact information. Certainly, I would advise you to, if you do have a trusted advisor, to contact them to get the ball rolling with your business transition planning. As was mentioned earlier, it can be great to have someone with a lead role with that, or a quarterback, so to speak. And certainly someone like Julie would be fantastic person to contact to begin that conversation. But that is, has been mentioned earlier, that is a huge part of the battle, is picking up the phone or making that first step to begin the process of planning for these types of transitions. So thank you everybody so much for having us. We really appreciate it. We're open to any questions you might have right now for a few minutes. And certainly anybody that's watching our presentation on recording, feel free to reach out to any of us anytime if you have any questions, or if you want to begin the conversation. All right, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned a 5-year period, up to a